Two special guests, Michael Allen Herman and Josie Eli Herman, are a married couple and a Webby-honored fiction podcast team from Pinckney, Michigan. And they're the creators and showrunners of the award-winning sci-fi audio drama The Call of the Void and podcast thriller Silvertongues. The Call of the Void is a fully immersive sci-fi mystery podcast, and Silvertongues is a fully immersive sci-fi tropical thriller podcast. So tonight, they'll be sharing their experience using the podcast format to tell cinematic stories and tell stories about their process and answer your questions about storytelling with podcasts, crowdfunding, and how to build an audience as well on your own independent podcast. So just a quick note, we are live streaming this event. And so for the audience members who are enjoying it remotely, I ask that we'll have a Q&A session at the end. And I'll be around with a microphone and I'll run to you when it's your turn to ask a question. So just to be aware, we'll be doing that at the end. Okay, so please help me welcome Josie and Michael.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much,
guys.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you guys coming out, and we can't wait to share some of the things that we've discovered in the journey of making podcasting, because it's a wonderful medium that not a lot of people know the ins and outs of. So we'll be excited to share that with you today.
And it's a really fun medium to get your little paws into, because almost anyone can do it. I mean, it's something that you can do on a very small budget, and of course there's a glass ceiling to it as well. But if you want to, you can make a podcast with just maybe a couple $100 to make a huge story that's a big budget that would be millions of dollars to make on a screen.
Right. And so the idea, the big idea that you have, it isn't limited, right, by the budget. You can have a huge, big blockbuster story, and like Josie just said, have it on a very, very reasonable budget, which is super exciting.
And it's sort of a basic thing that we have, because I know that we have a lot of big range of people. We have people that have a podcast already and people that are, oh, I want to make a podcast, but I don't know how. So we'll be talking about it from basically step 0 to releasing your podcast.
Yeah, and there's basically, and you guys all have a handout for this too, but there's basically 6 steps that are required to make a podcast go from the very bare bones idea where you're like, I have no idea what's going on here, all the way to having it released on all of the streaming platforms and being heard by an audience. And we're going to go through those with you today, which is very exciting. The first thing that we're going to want to have is a plan. Like anything, you always want to know what you're stepping into and what are some of those expectations. And we found that the plan kind of has 2 sort of components to it, sort of 2 prongs to this plan, and that's going to be the creative side and then the financial side. So the creative side is just that big. What is this idea? What is the shiny object that we're trying to convey with this story, right? And we use that word shiny object. And do you want to talk about what that is, babe? It's like a...
Yeah, so the shiny object, that term basically is what sets this show apart from another podcast show or any other work of fiction or work of art. So why listen to your show specifically? For instance, if you think about something like Hot Ones, does anyone know the show Hot Ones? The shiny object of Hot Ones, of course, is that they're not just interviewing celebrities, they're interviewing celebrities while they are eating spicy foods. So that's their shiny object, and that's the reason why Hot Ones kind of blew up, because it's a little different than just talking to a celebrity, right?
Yeah, and the reason, guys, is we want to set pretty early on, whenever you make a show, an expectation. So the audience knows what they're tuning in for, and they kind of get used to that. So if it is a talk show and you're hearing interviews from celebrities, that's the expectation. They're going to be challenged by the wings. Can they make it? If it's a sci-fi story with some action, we want every week to have that expectation met, right? There's some sci-fi elements, there's a mystery element, there's some action elements. Whatever you're interested in exploring, we want to set that expectation. And knowing that right here from the get-go on the creative side is super important, to know why I'm telling this story and why an audience needs to check out this story.
Yeah, and that bleeds into, we might talk about this a little bit later, but it also bleeds into this idea of what you want to leave your audience with, because your show might be a show about travel, for instance, but you still want to give your audience something, right? You want the audience to feel at the end of listening to your show that travel is easy or travel can change your life. You want to think about what is the message that you're giving to your audience. And that's something that you can think about pretty early on, and that really helps guide you in creating content.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you can really use your interests and what you want to your advantage. So you can think like, what's the kind of show I've always wanted to see in whatever genre you want to work in, and that instinct is a wonderful one to trust, because like, I'm interested in this, more people will be too. They're going to be drawn in to the same thing.
And we were talking a little bit about nonfiction, but that goes into fiction too. We do fiction podcasts, so your shiny object is like what makes this story different than other stories, and also the message that you're saying. It's like what does this story mean, and why tell this story in this age? For Call of the Void, it was very much this story of intrusive thoughts and the story of finding hope. And it was a really beautiful story, a lot about isolation and finding each other and growing love, basically, like loving relationships and friendship and everything. And that became very, very important to a lot of our listeners, especially during COVID times. So, think about what you are saying to your audience, why now, and why are you saying it too? Is a important thing to think about.
Absolutely.
What makes it personal for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's sort of phase one of the plan there, right? Knowing why we're saying this, what's the shiny object. The other side of the plan, hey, welcome, friends. Come on in. The other side of the plan, of course, is that financial element. And you do want to consider what it's going to take to put this together. Good news, podcasting is very affordable.
Yeah.
Like, to really get you going, there's a whole spectrum here, right? But to really get you going, you need a microphone, right?
Yeah, that's all you need to get yourself going on a podcast.
That's the essential ingredient. That's what you really need. And we have a little microphone here up on the stage. This is a very great entry-level microphone. It's called a Blue Yeti, and it's a USB microphone.
And it's written on there for anyone. If you're just coming in, try to get yourself a seat with one of these papers, because we've got some information there for you.
Yeah. This is a great entry-level microphone. It's called a USB microphone because you just plug it in via USB to a port on your computer, and away you go. So it's a great way to start. There are mixers. There's lots of other things that you can buy, but this is once again a great way to start.
Right, yeah. Especially for somebody who's like, I'm interested in making a podcast, but I have no idea how. We definitely recommend keeping it nice and simple and easy at the beginning for you.
Yep, absolutely. So from there, I mean, some of the other expenses that you could expect, actors, sound designers, things like that, those are things you want to plan in this phase too, because if you do want to get a group of like 6, 7 actors involved, then you want to start to estimate those prices as well.
And of course, there's also a range there, right? I mean, your actors could be friends that you are inviting over, and the payment is
just pizza.
But of course, you do want to start to think about that early on. Like, okay, what are my expenses here? Is it just the microphone? Am I paying actors? Am I paying for guests to come on? Or am I paying a graphic designer to help me with the promotion of the show? You want to start to think about that pretty early on.
Yeah. But now we got this great idea. We're thinking, hey, we got this really cool show. We're going to make this come alive. It's going to be very exciting. We're immediately going to be moving into that next phase, which is going to be the writing phase, or actually creating that, which is number 2 here on the paper for those who have a paper in their hand. That's going to be planning out what's going on with this show, and we can't stress that enough, how important, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, having a plan and knowing where you're going. So having a season that you, even for nonfiction, knowing I'm going to do 12 episodes for this season is so, so important. That way you don't just keep making a show forever, and then 20 episodes in, you're just like, I got to make this end. Like, I've been doing this for too long. It's great to know, what is my season of episodes? What am I going to be doing in that time? Yeah.
And it also can help you build an audience too, because if you know that yourself, you can talk about that. You can start to promote it in this, with this knowledge of this is where my season is going, and this is what you can expect, and this is how it's going to grow. You can, knowing all that knowledge, once again, whether that's nonfiction or fiction. Fiction is a whole nother ball game, because we'll get into that in a second, but at least with nonfiction, you also want to have a really good plan. Every episode should have its own, of course, title and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So then you know where you're going from there. And let's talk about fiction, because fiction is really our specialty when it comes to podcast making. And fiction, we believe in an outline. We love writing what we call the note card method, which is that every scene gets a note card, and then we just put all these note cards out on a table, and we just play this game of Tetris where we move note cards back and forth and go, okay, this is the sequence where they discover that their dad's an alien, and then that's moving here, and maybe that doesn't work here, and you just play this game back and forth. Why we use a note card method like this is it just allows you to start playing with content very, very quickly and to judge yourself less.
Yeah, that can be a great way to shape your story if you have a bunch of ideas, but you don't totally know how they all connect yet. If you put all your ideas onto note cards, then you can go like, okay, I've got these isolated ideas. Let's string them together and help to build this story and make it coherent.
Really, really helpful.
And honestly, we could talk about writing a podcast forever and ever and ever, but I know that this is 1 hour to talk about everything. So if people want to talk with us more about the specifics of writing your show, especially if it's a fiction show, we have a lot to say about that, but only a little bit of time. But
right. We do want to throw one other thing about the writing phase out to everybody, which is knowing your ending as soon as possible is also so important. Me as a writer, I love starting things and not finishing them. But having ideas, like that's such a good idea. And then not finishing it. But I found that as soon as I have the start of my world, it's really important for me to think about how it's going to end. And an ending just usually means like, what am I trying to say? What is this message? Where are these characters going? Knowing some of those things is going to be what that ending is. But it's really critical to get that at least, in like the binoculars as a writer, so you know kind of where you're going.
Yeah, and to think about your characters' arcs as well. So not just where the plot ends up, like, how the day is saved, but like where are your characters going emotionally? If this character is dissociated with their family at the beginning and you want them to connect with their family at the end, that is their character arc. So that's going to help you build the entire story and build even all these little plot points on the way. As long as you know where you want your characters to end, that's really the best way to help that flow.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we have an idea, an outline. We're going to write a very bad first draft, and I can't stress that enough. Let it be very bad. Sometimes my opening scenes are just a character walks in and he goes, "You suck. I never liked you," and then like walks out. That much of a skeleton, just to indicate what are the major beats that are going on inside that story. Because you can't rewrite what you don't write. You can rewrite what you have written, but you have to get something down first before you can rewrite it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So once we have that, we've got an idea. We've written something very exciting. We're going to start to move more rapidly towards the idea of actually producing this podcast and some production elements. And the first phase that we'd like to talk about in that era is the art phase.
Yeah. So podcasting is not a visual format. However, there is one element that is very important for your podcast, and that's your cover photo. We can't stress that enough, honestly, because that is the thing that will make people click on your show and listen to it, or not, or pass it up. So having a good cover art is one of the best things you can do to just start promoting your show and start getting listeners.
And what does good mean? It depends on what your show is. It's once again about that expectation. So if you are making a sci-fi show, then you want that cover art image to indicate that genre in some kind of way. If it's a horror podcast, once again, you want it to indicate that genre in some kind of way. That way people know right from the get-go what they're signing up for and what they're going to be receiving.
Or if it's a nonfiction and it's a certain topic, obviously images that invoke that topic, but also the mood. So like if your show is about cats, but it's very funny, like you'll want a graphic that both says cat and also this is a very funny show. And that's going to look a lot different than, a very
somber
a
cat
story
podcast.
about getting over grief. Like that's going to be a different graphic, and it's really important to relay that to your potential listeners.
Yeah, right. And that idea of that mood or that vibe is going to translate across to any other sort of design element of your show, whether that be a website or social media, wherever you want to sort of spread the word of your podcast, you do want to make sure it kind of lives in the same world. Because we've made mistakes before where people have said like, "Oh, I didn't know that was what the show was about," until I started listening, because they thought it was one thing and then it was something else,
Yeah.
And that can be weird. Like right from the get-go, they're like, "Oh, I thought I signed up for this and I didn't sign up for that," and you don't want that to be your first handshake, for an audience.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have some, wonderful resources on this paper that you can take a look at.
One really quick just note about that is we very much encourage not using AI for any kind of design.
That's
because,
true.
Yeah, I mean, we don't like AI ourselves, but also it's a pretty big trigger. People can notice it, and when they see that you're taking shortcuts with your first little graphic image, they're going to assume you're taking a lot of shortcuts with your show as well. So
It's true. It's sort of the culture of podcasting because it comes from the internet. They're like a lot of internet people, and so when you then use AI, where there's some ethical AI, but a lot of AI is using art from other people. The scrappy people of the internet don't like that,
Yeah,
right?
they do
So
not.
we once again encourage you to either hire a graphic designer or use some sort of copyright image that is allowed to be used, that kind of thing. So
if you know any friend that has a little bit of graphic design or
Yeah.
do it yourself, yeah.
Yep,
Learn
yep.
how to. It doesn't have to be super complicated, but it should be something that gets a nice click.
Right. Yep. So that's the art phase. Moving right along, we're getting into a very exciting phase here, which is in fact the production phase of creating the podcast. That's when the mic is going to have a little red light, and it's going to be when you're actually recording content and bringing your show to life, which is very, very exciting. Once again, whether it's nonfiction or it's fiction, you do want to prepare for that. If it's nonfiction, you're going to want to research your guests a little bit, know who you're bringing on. That way you can have a couple backup conversation starters, things like that can keep the rhythm flowing with the podcast, or even just that who you're talking to as well, to make sure that that's going well. With fiction, you're obviously going to be casting the show and bringing in actors.
Yeah. For and that's, we can talk so much about this because this is what we do, and we love working with actors. For anybody that is interested in doing something like that and is like, I want to have a full cast immersive show, I have no idea how to do that though. We have a couple tips. So like Ann Arbor has so many beautiful, wonderful, professional theaters that have awesome actors. What I would encourage is going to see some of these shows and take your program home. If there's any actor that you see that you like and you're like, oh my gosh, like I would love to work with them, I'd love to cast them in my show, I guarantee they would be very excited about that. So yeah, that's one of the best ways. There's lots of theaters around. Theater Nova, Penny Seats Theater. What other?
Gosh, there's so many.
Yeah.
Ann Arbor Civic. There's tons.
Ann Arbor, yeah. Community theaters, professional theaters. I guarantee, like that's one of the best ways to find actors for your shows.
Yeah. Additionally, because it's podcasting, you can cast voice actors around the world as well. So if you reach out to somebody on social media, whether that's Instagram or whether that's Blue Sky or Twitter, whatever it is, X, there's lots of voice actors who have their own personal profiles on there as well. So you can reach out to some of those people. And they all have these things called reels, which some people may know what that is, but it's basically just a collection of their voice clips, and you get a sense of who they are pretty quickly. So that's a good way to hear their voice very, very fast. Once you have them cast and you feel like this is a rock star team and it's going to be awesome here working together, we're going to be recording. And there's a couple really essential pieces for a successful recording, especially on a scrappy budget. And once again, first one's going to be a good mic. So get yourself a decent mic like this USB mic, Blue Yeti here. And then you're going to want to have a nice room, a nice quiet space for you to record in, and some tips for that. If the room has a lot of blank walls, it's going to echo.
Yeah.
And echoing can be heard in the final
Or if it has
recording.
really high ceilings as well.
Yeah.
Usually, yeah.
Yep. If you do a test recording and you hear a weird buzz, like sort of like this like weird buzzing in the background, that might be because you have a fridge or some kind of electrical device you're used to it. You've heard those sounds, but the mic's now capturing them for the first time, and so you're like, wow, okay, I didn't know there was so much white noise that's around me. And it's sort of this weird game of like walking around your house or wherever your recording area is and turning things off and on until you have a quiet place. noise reduction and getting rid of some of those things is possible in post, but it is just better to have a nice, clean recording from where you are there. And being able to record just good sound there. So I highly recommend experimenting with your space and making sure that you know where you can record before you bring over an actor or bring over a guest. That way you aren't rather embarrassingly running in front of them going like, oh yeah, well, 1 second, I'll get it.
Yeah, definitely do some testing.
Yep. Even little like testing, like if you're going to record 2 people, sometimes mics interfere with each other, 2 mics. So there's just good to test all, like exactly how the scenario is going to be and test that out so that you know what's going to be going on in that situation.
Another thing to think about if you're someone who would love to work with actors and you're like, but I just don't know how to work with actors. I don't know how to talk to them. I want them to do a good job in my show. I want them to be a certain way. There's a little bit of like practice to directing a show as well. So yeah, I would definitely encourage doing a little rehearsal with your actors, if at all possible. And that just involves, first of all, just talking to them a little bit about their characters, talk about what their character motivation is, like what they want, what they're afraid of, what they, what they need in life, and let that kind of sit with the actor a little bit. You can also read a scene with them, and just see how they read it, and if there's anything that they're not quite doing, don't be too shy about giving them some instruction and some, like, when you say that line, like your motivation is here. You're trying to intimidate this person, or you're trying to comfort them. So figuring out a little bit of a lingo of like how to direct an actor is very important if you're doing any kind of like fiction podcasting, because I guarantee there's going to be a lot of times where you're in the room and an actor does something and you're like, oh no, that's not exactly right, but I don't know what to do to make it right. And don't stress too much over it. It's going to be okay. But yeah, gently, very gently, figure out some lingo, some words to help your actor into the perfect version of that character.
Because the good news, this medium, you can always do another take. You can just keep the mic
true.
rolling. You can rewind, say, oh, okay, that was weird. Let's do it again. And you can jump back into it, which is not the case for, like live theater or even film. Sometimes film's pretty high stakes. So being able to just step back and jump into it's just wonderful. It's wonderful about the medium that you can do that. Yeah. Great. As far as like recording software, if anybody is like interested in a little bit of that tech talk, I don't want to talk about it too much, but we do recommend a free one called Audacity. It's also once again written on this sheet. It looks like it was made in the 70s. I think it was, and it's because it's still good. It works great since it did in the 70s.
It ain't broke.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it's really a wonderful just recording device that once you've plugged in your mic, you boot up the program, you install it like any other program, and just click record.
Yeah, and once again, there's a glass roof here. You could get
Pro Tools or something.
Pro Tools.
Yeah.
There's very many that you could do, but like Audacity is wonderful for beginners. Especially if you're on a budget and you don't want to start with something that you have to commit to a monthly fee for or anything. It's totally free.
Yeah, right. And once again, that's a great place for you to start to experiment and to hear some of that background sound, or to see, what peaks look like and all that stuff. So you can just start to experiment and go, oh, okay, this is what it looks like when I capture audio, and this is where the best room to capture audio is and to play with it.
There's really no substitute for just experimentation. Just get your hands dirty with it. Plug in a microphone to your computer, put on that Audacity or whatever program you're using, and do a little bit of testing. See how your voice sounds and what the appropriate levels are. See where it peaks and when it's too quiet, and that's the best way to learn.
Yeah, one word that Josie just said there, peaks when like the data has been compressed because it's gotten too loud. Peaking is one of the few things that you can't fix in post with audio. So you do want to make sure that nothing gets too loud. It's just, it's like really, really difficult to try to save a peaked out audio. So yeah, making sure that the peaks aren't way too big. Once again, for some like deep industry talk, around like -16 is like perfect for like receiving audio inside Audacity. If you want to talk about that more, we'll talk about it afterwards. That's some deep tech talk. So yeah, people that are just like, hey, I'm
I don't know.
I'm here for podcast, like to learn about a podcast. Well, yeah, that's great too. So Great.
Yeah, so the next thing, we're going to talk a little bit about post-production too, because there's a quality bar that happens with a lot of podcasting, and you want to make sure that your podcast is really really listenable, right? Sure. There's you could of course just record something, whether that's fiction or nonfiction, and go, that's good enough. Okay, release it. But people make mouth noises. People make
So many mouth noises.
And for nonfiction, people bumble sometimes. People say and like too much and stuff like that. So we really do recommend taking some time and really making your the stuff that you've recorded the finest quality, the finest version that you can possibly make it, whether that's
Right.
fiction or nonfiction.
And we recommend, there's sort of like a 3-step post-production process for us. We have 3 phases. The first one is the dialogue pass, which is exactly what Josie's talking about there. It's this idea of cleaning up the audio, removing the disfluencies, making sure that people sound intelligent and are saying cool things, and none of the subject matter is, rambly or weird.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't be too scared to cut rambling moments. Like, even if you plan something in your outline, whether that's a scene or it's like something like in a nonfiction, a conversation part that you thought was going to be interesting, and then you listen back and you're like, that's not very good. Don't be scared to cut it, because if you're listening back and you think that that's boring, I guarantee the audience will too. And so just cleaning up all of this stuff is really good. What's gonna make your show really enjoyable and get more listeners, and all these little nitty gritty things are pretty
Totally.
important.
And then in the fiction side of things, in this dialogue pass, this is also when you're choosing the performances and making sure that the characters are brought to life in the way that you truly want them to. And Josie is a saint, and she's the one who does this pass for us. I don't do the dialogue pass because it's so difficult, but she finds all these wonderful performances, and sometimes even like mid-sentence, mid-word, we'll splice 2 different takes to make sure that it's done just so.
Yeah, for anybody who is I'm kind of a director mind who is going to work with actors and stuff like that for a fiction podcast, that's part of your job as a director too, is not just in the room telling them how to act and getting them to a certain emotional place, but also making these decisions, making these artistic decisions in the editing room to really refine your story.
Right. So that's phase 1 of
That's phase 1.
the post-production pass. How are we all doing? You guys doing good? You with us? Great. I've seen thumbs. Good to see. So that's phase 1. The second one is going to be that sound effects pass, which, as you might expect, is all about sound effects. This could be very simple, very minimal, especially for a nonfiction podcast.
Yeah,
just some environmental.
If it's a nonfiction podcast, maybe this looks very, very simple and quick. It might be an intro song and an extra song, and that might be it.
And that's it. But there's a whole another side of podcasting, which is fiction podcasting, where you hear every sound. It's almost like a Netflix show is playing in the other room, and you're hearing the sound effects, of what's happening. And that's the style of audio that we design. So every footstep, every door, when planes crash, we design all of that stuff.
Yeah, and I'll say too, we said, a Netflix show is playing in the other room. However, there's an additional step to that, which is there is no visual, there is no Netflix show that you can watch. Sure. So all of those sounds have to be interesting and also clear enough for you to understand what's going on in every scene. So it can't be so complicated or just so wow going on that you don't know what's going on. Everything has to be thought out. So almost visually, you have to picture it in your head, and then go is this? Are people picturing what I'm picturing just by listening to this?
And it's sort of funny. Sometimes the sound that you want isn't made from the actual object. So, for example, one of our favorites is that rain is like chicken cooking. Makes great rain noise because you hear this shh, over a stove. It makes great rain noise. Or a neck snap is you can use a water bottle or celery. Celery makes a great really crunchy.
Stabbed a lot of fruit. For stabbing people.
Yeah, that's a nice juicy sort of stab there. So that's a great sound. One time we made a gun rotate by rotating a glass bowl. To give a whoa 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 sort of noise, and it's
like a propeller, right?
Right. It's sort of fun. The more sound design you do, the more you walk around life and you hear sounds and you're
go
that's great. That's a great sound.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, whenever I pick up cups, I always like scrape them because it's just like it's more satisfying to hear like a shink noise instead of just like lifting a cup.
Yeah. This for a show like very immersive fiction podcast, this might be the biggest, longest, most exciting phase. It can be very fun, and it can also be a little frustrating. But we really enjoy it. You could just have so much fun with it, and like especially if you make a lot of your own sound effects, it could be very fun.
Yeah. For people that are like, but how do you get those sound effects? Like, how do you make the gun noises and all kinds of things like that? There are also free resources online.
Yeah.
For you to find free sounds. Freesounds.org.
Yeah,
great
we've
place
got
to go.
a couple of those listed on that paper there.
Pixabay is another good one.
Freesounds.org and Pixabay are two of the ones that we use the most. Those are completely free, copyright-free sounds, and they have a lot. They have everything from just very basic environmental things, picking up silverware and stuff like that, to like monster noises. So it's fun to explore and see
really
what
cool
they
stuff.
got.
And it's especially fun to mix them, right? So like if you mix this sound with that sound, all of a sudden it's a whole different sound.
Yes.
It's a whole different landscape, which is really, really fun.
Very fun.
So so that's we've done the dialogue pass, we've done the sound effects pass, and the last phase of that is going to be mixing and making sure that the levels are intentional, and as Josie was saying, everything's clear. We don't want any sound effect to block, like totally eliminate the words if there's a dialogue moment happening in the story. We want to make sure everything's mixed appropriately so that we can understand the story and understand what's going on. The last thing you want an audience to do is go like, "What was that? I'm confused. I don't understand what's going on now."
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and I guess I'm going back just a little bit, but we do this in this phase too, is making sure that all of these sounds that you're doing, that they don't just like, they're not just sounds that are in the scene, but they're sounds that help tell the story and help tell the character emotions even. So we talk about this all the time, like footsteps, like you might just go bump, 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 bump. They walk into the room. But, like in a walk and talk conversation where two people are talking, there might be a moment where you choose that their footsteps stop in a midway during the conversation. And that's going to be a very dramatic beat because all of a sudden these characters, they stopped and they looked at each other. And you can make these choices as an editor, a director, podcast creator, that those really start to help the world and help flesh out the not just the scene itself, what's happening in the scene, but also just like what the characters are feeling, how they're connecting, their relationships, if they get upset at each other. It's a really fun thing to do.
Yeah, and how you find some of those choices, these awesome ideas of like when should a character stop or that kind of stuff. It's sort of using the theater of the mind. You're the first audience member, and you imagine like if this scene was happening in front of me, how do I see the players moving? How do I see what that door looks like? Is it a creepy door? Like what is it that I can bring alive? With these choices and experience it as an audience member, so you can truly understand what's happening there. Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah.
Great. Now you've made an incredible show.
Yay.
You've got all the sound effects. You have an incredible cast, and all of these pieces are working together, hopefully. Hopefully at this phase, everything's all coming together. We're moving into the release phase, which is how we get this out there into the world. And once again, unlike some other mediums, podcasting, there isn't as much of a gatekeep that happens for podcasting. Film, it's like Netflix is very choosy about who gets to be on their platform. Podcasting is much more free, much more open market because again, it comes from the internet, it comes from these scrappy people trying to create shows. So you'd expect it's similar for the release as well. But there is still something called the podcast distributor, and there's a lot of ones you can choose from, and we've once again written some down on the sheet there for you. One of our absolute favorites is Spotify for podcasters. And the reason is because it's free, and you're able to send a show out to the world, and it does connect with every single podcasting app that is out there. So Spotify, Apple, all of them.
Right. So it's not just like your show is just going to be on Spotify. It's on all of the platforms that you would listen to podcasts on.
Yep, because it's sort of strange as you dip into the world, you discover that there's like a huge audience behind like the app called Podcast Addict. Like they're very interested in that app. So you do want to be on every podcast provider that you can think of, so that the audience can find you on their favorite platform. Mm-hmm. And once again, there's no reason not to be because they're all open for you to go to. So that's a great place to do. There's other podcast distributors, of course, too, like there's Podbean, there's Libsyn, there's a bunch of other ones that they do cost like a monthly or a yearly subscription, and the reason being that they provide more support for there's more deep dives into analytics, or there's more control with like ads and things like that as well. So there's a financial way that you can climb on some of these other ones as well. So certainly, I would say look into those if that's something that you're interested in. But if you're just trying to start a podcast and want to put something together, Spotify for Podcasters is a wonderful way to get started, and to try to make a show.
Yeah, and the ones that are paid, they don't necessarily guarantee that more listeners are gonna come your way.
Not at all.
Not at all. You'll get more benefits on the inner end of analytics and stuff, but you promoting your show, that's still kind of on you for any distributor that you get.
Right. Yep. Though we will say there are ways to become more successful in the release schedule and to build a larger audience, and that's some of the stuff that we're going to talk about now. The first is, of course, to have a regular schedule that you're releasing on. So establishing a pattern that an audience can follow is one of the very best ways for you to in fact, build that audience. So if it's like, hey, I want to release on Thursdays at 5 a.m., that's like going to be your sort of promise to the audience. They can expect every week they can tune in at Thursday at 5 a.m., and there'll be a new episode.
And we definitely recommend, if you're going to do weekly, like we did for our shows, we did them weekly, but we definitely just planned it out so that it was like, it's 9 weeks, and then we're done. Because if you do a weekly show for 2 years, every single week, that's going to be your entire life.
That's
going to
be what you
like,
do.
I can't do anything else.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, having a planned out schedule where your audience knows exactly when to tune in, that's really helpful for getting listeners.
We found that weekly is sort of the sweet spot for podcasting. More than a weekly doesn't help. We recently tried a show where we did twice a week, and it didn't do much for the analytics. It basically
about the same.
Basically,
Yeah.
was the same. So weekly is pretty great. Every other week is okay too, but we have noticed that is slower. And we have a show going on right now that's every other week, and it is a slower climb
Yeah.
because people it's not as much part of their routine, to be connected.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say obviously do what you're most comfortable with, but I would say we would recommend for the most amount of listeners having a shorter season that is just released more frequently. So once a week, and there's 10 episodes or something, or however many episodes, rather than like 10 episodes spread out once a month throughout the whole year.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's just it'll be a closer experience there for you. Also, releasing in the mornings is also a good idea, depending on the show.
Because people like to listen on their drive to work.
Most people listen to podcasts when they're driving, to work. So that's a great time to make sure that when they are there in the morning, they're going to see your episode.
I think we would also recommend not on the weekends, because people
Right.
love to listen on their way to work, rather than in the weekends they want to sleep in and or they just want to watch movies and hang out with their family or whatever.
Right. Oh, and that actually reminded me another good little hot tip there for you. A podcast for fiction. A podcast that's about 25 to 30 minutes is kind of like the ear listening ratio for how long somebody wants to listen to a podcast. It's about 25, 30 minutes for fiction. Nonfiction, like talk show, maybe more like 60 minutes, for sort of the cap of how long people want to listen. But longer than that, people kind of are done listening. They don't want to hear you anymore, So yeah, we discovered that that's kind of a sweet spot. If we push longer than that, there's usually a hit that happens in the analytics. Yeah, great. So, excellent. So, an existing release schedule, very important. The other way, again, because it comes from the internet, having some kind of social media presence, of course, is going to help with grow your podcast audience. It's one of the best ways to grow a podcast audience, but there are so many different.
Yeah, and we'll say for people that are like, oh, social media, it is important, but the nice thing is do whatever feels right for you. The social media is so volatile. It changes all the time. So we're not necessarily going to recommend certain platforms, but I think it's important to get maybe a couple platforms that you think I'm going to invest a little bit of time into these, I don't know, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or whatever, or maybe it's TikTok, but find a couple that you like and then just invest in those rather than trying to do all of them and split yourself through 20 different social medias. Just get 2 or 3.
Right, yep. Something you can, you feel like you can comfortably, work and not be too intimidated by.
And another thing that we should say is put yourself out there on the social media, and also like when people start to follow you, really interact with them. Like you'll maybe get some listeners from people around the world or around the United States, and when you start to interact with them on a personal level, they'll love your show even more. They'll be, the more you can be personal and connected with them and everything, the more you invest into them, they're going to invest into you, and even like listening and also financially.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Another wonderful way that's like, it's still social media, but it's kind of like next to social media is, of course, finding the various communities in the world of podcasting. And Reddit is honestly a wonderful place for that. So especially for fiction podcasting, there's an audio drama subreddit, and that's a great place to connect with other creators. They're always looking for recommendations over there, and you'll meet fellow artists who are working in this medium and be able to network with them.
It's a really rewarding thing, honestly, to talk to people that love your show. That's one of the best things, one of the things that has kept us doing this for a while, and one of the things that has helped us in the most challenging times is talking to people that say, hey, your show really means a lot to me, or it's funny, or it's whatever your show is. People that, whether it's, maybe it starts with just one person that found your show, but it's really a wonderful experience that kind of means the world to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So yes, and so then great. One last thing, one last like sort of category to talk about, and then we will be moving into the Q&A, so you guys can ask us the toughest questions you've ever asked in your lives. And that's the financial side of things. We want to touch on that just a smidge. So if you are looking at this and saying, hey, podcasting is sounding really great, Michael and Josie, I think I want to pursue this, and I also want to like break even or make some money off of this, there's a couple ways you can do that too. Crowdfunding is, of course, on the table. So that's going to be your Patreons, that's going to be your Kickstarters, things that allow you to build an audience right from the get-go, where you're showcasing your idea and encouraging people to support you, to donate. You're that way as well. You also can, of course, reach out to small local businesses to be sponsors for your show. We've done all of these things. And you can reach out to other, to producer types as well, and say, would you be interested in serving as an associate producer on this in exchange for a financial benefit of some kind? And it's a lot of networking. We're happy to talk about that more if there's an interest there. But yeah, those are sort of like the three main ones that we've discovered, whether it be crowdfunding, whether it be sponsorships, or been reaching out to producer types. And usually for sponsorships, they want some sort of like ad space where they can shout out their business in some kind of capacity. And producers, they just want to have their name on it so that you're listing them as in the credits or something like that.
Occasionally, you might get a producer who, I think we did this one time, we had a person just want to be involved with the show, so we gave them a little role. So that's like something that is a possibility as well. And as you kind of start to make connections and stuff like that, you'll maybe find things like that, little treasures of how to make money.
Right. But I hope that you find from everything that we've said so far today that it's a medium that is very accessible to you, even with the tools that you have right now at your disposal. You can truly make a world, even a high budget, huge big world, on a very, very reasonable budget, and be able to share that with the world. And we, especially from our early phases of like the first season of Call of the Void, we didn't know much, and we just took that leap. So it's our invitation to you that you also take that leap. If you have an idea that you've always wanted to bring alive, just jump and see where you land, because there's a wonderful audience that will receive you in the world of podcasting, and it'd be a wonderful way for you to stretch your voice and see what you can create.
Podcasting is a wonderful, wonderful thing for people who love to wear a lot of hats. We like Michael said, we didn't really know anything about editing or recording or anything. We knew about acting and writing, basically. Those are the things we knew about. But we were like, you know what? We really want to make like a crazy world science fiction, like $1 million thing, but we don't have that money. So, and we love the idea. As we listen to podcasts, we're like, this is so interesting. We just loved the idea that you could immerse yourself in this visual, or just with audio, and then just in your mind visualize all of it. So it became such a beautiful, wonderful medium that we just love, and just have so much fun with it. So
Great. Guys, you've heard us gab up here a lot, and we would love, love, love to hear any questions that you might have. If you do have a question, Lauren will be running around with the microphone. The reason is we are live streaming this, and they won't hear you on the live stream if you don't speak into the microphone. So please wait for the microphone, and then you can do that. And once again, please ask us any question. No questions too dumb. Even if you just want to say like, okay, well, how do you make a certain sound, or why did you make a certain show? Whatever it is. Yeah, these are we're honestly here to answer any questions that you might have. Yeah, anybody feeling? Oh, back there, yeah.
All right. First of all, thank you both for volunteering your time to assist all of us. I know I've learned a lot, and I'm assuming that I'm speaking for most of the other people here as well. But the reason why I'm here is because I have 5 children, and I'm trying to get them interested in something besides sports. And so I thought, man, if we could do some kind of a podcast, I would love it. And so that's why I'm here today. But one question that came up in my head was, most people, when they speak into a microphone or they speak in public, they get a little self-conscious about how their voice sounds. I think you know where I'm going with this. But what are some tips that you can do to kind of get over that, I guess, self-consciousness about your voice? Some exercises maybe that you can do, or whatever, to assist with that.
That is
Absolutely.
that is such a good question. And it's something that, like, I know we ourselves, even as actors, we're used to doing film and theater, but something about getting in front of a microphone for the first time, you're like, oh, so it can be, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to set yourself up for success. So the first thing is going to be warming up your instrument, and that's articulation is going to be the primary thing to make sure that you're able to speak clearly and know what you're saying. And the other thing is just, like, honestly, going through it and rehearsing it is going to expose a lot for you, right? Like, I discovered I speak way too fast on the mic. I just, like, bumble my words and I speak too fast. And I actually thought that was going to be a really cool character choice for the first season of Call of the Void. And then all of the listeners were like,
the reviews were like,
they were like, why do you talk like that? Like, stop talking like that. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll talk not like that.
so we went back and fixed it.
Yeah, so we went back and fixed it. And so, yes, for me personally, it was slowing it down, and I didn't know that until I just started recording. So I encourage you just, spend some time in front of the microphone and go, whoa, I say my S is super long, or I have a really, like, Midwestern R, and discovering some of those things so that you can focus on
And
them.
if you are working with kids too, like, not just yourself, but you're trying to get kids to perform, we just had a lovely session with one of the podcasts that we're working on right now. We had a session with a young actress, and I think like setting up a nice little space where they feel kind of like safe and lots of encouragement, and sort of making sure that you're also speaking slow with them, kind of like, okay, like, we're gonna do this, and also just encouraging them and telling them that they're doing really great goes a long way. Yeah. And also, like, having fun with the character too. Like, if I'm not sure exactly what you're planning with your show, but if you're working with somebody, whatever age, and they have a certain character that's, like, kind of a goofy character or something like that, making sure that they're having fun with that character. Kind of try to get it out of their head that this is there's a microphone right there, and just allow them to sort of, like, live in this character. Sometimes it can be more of a warm-up thing, but sometimes giving them a little bit of body movement as well to get into things can be a nice way to shake things up and make them less nervous. So I don't know, let's say they're playing a character who's a little monkey character, and just kind of getting them to go like this. All of a sudden they feel kind of silly and they're saying their lines like this, and then that just allows them to have fun and play. And that is the key to any kind of acting or just performing is play.
Can you describe the interaction with your listener? I'm not sure how they contact you, and in return, how do you contact them back?
Yeah, great question. There's a lot of ways. We like to make ourselves pretty available. So at the end of every episode, we usually have sort of contact us this way. We have a website and we have an email that we make pretty readily available to them. But they also contact us a lot through social media. I would say Twitter, or not Twitter anymore, but Instagram and Facebook and stuff. They contact us a lot through there.
We also have a Discord for our shows too. So there's a little bit of like an online community that talks through there, and it's been really cool. Like some of our listeners have
all
gotten
different
tattoos
ways.
of our work.
Oh
like,
yeah.
yeah. There's been a really cool community that's
And we've got to like meet some of our
meet them in
listeners too
person.
that we didn't know at all, and got to meet up with them. But yeah, I would say however they reach out to you, whether it's email. Always make sure that you're responding to them with like so much love and just appreciation for them. It goes a long way, and not just for them, but for you too. Like it's wonderful to kind of, form those relationships.
Hi, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
You guys mentioned this a little bit, but and you've mentioned it in your more like Q&As on your shows as well, but one thing that you say your listeners love and that I love is that you keep your show ad-free. And I'm wondering, how do you specifically go about do that? What are the tips you would recommend for other people who are interested in this to try to keep their shows at least ad minimum, if not ad-free as the goal, especially in scenarios where unlike you guys being so Michigan-based and Michigan-focused and able to draw from those local contacts, people who are maybe doing things nationally or even internationally?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good question. Yep. So we do ad-free content. That's true. I will say that nobody is offended by an ad at the very top of an episode, though. Usually, if you sort of shout out something like, "Hey, this show is brought to you by something," people are okay with that. Where people do get upset, listeners especially, and they even start giving you bad stars or bad reviews, is if the ads are breaking up the content, like
Yeah, in the middle
in a
of the
distracting way, especially fiction. So if you're just like in the middle of a very exciting climactic moment, and then it's an ad break for BetterHelp, and we're going to talk about BetterHelp, that can be very, very distracting for our listeners. So what we prefer is the donation method, where we just very graciously ask people to support our shows, and then create something, a product that they're interested in receiving by donating. So for us, that looks like Patreon, and for us, that looks like...
Yeah, we just recently this year or within the last year started a Patreon, but before that we did something through DonorBox. That's just an online donation form that
Very
we link
similar.
up to our website. And I would say the best way to get people to donate is to give them some kind of perks back. We like to shout out them actually at the very end of our episode. So not not to be distracting. You can honestly turn off the episode before
sure.
that if you want, but it's really nice. People love it when they get to hear their name at the end of their favorite podcast. So thanking them personally. Thanking them by name. We often try to thank them on our social media as well by name, and then also just giving them little things. Like we had a thing where if they donated a certain amount, we actually mailed them like a package, and it had all this like cool like inner world stuff about our show that was like this, like not behind the scenes, but it was like in the world, like all these like documents, secret documents about the show,
We also do bonus scenes and things like that
Bonus
that you wouldn't
scenes, yeah.
receive unless you actually were supporting the show in that kind of capacity, and so we found
making
people
it like kind of a fun thing where people go like, ooh, and people love to receive that content, but if they love your show and if you're very personal with them, that's what's gonna really get them to donate.
Yeah. But yep, having a product that they can receive for donations, that's definitely the big one that's helping us. Yeah, great question.
Can you switch between your distributor? Like, are you able to? So, like, if you wanted to start with one and then you wanted to get analytics later once you get going, like, can you do that? Do you recommend it or not?
We've never done that, so I can't speak too much on that. But I do know that you can do
But yes,
that.
you can.
Yeah.
Yep. So it has to do with the RSS feed. So every podcast, when you create the podcast, it creates something called an RSS feed, which is this URL link that collects all of the listeners and all the downloads and everything, and it would involve importing that RSS feed to your other distributor. So yes, it is able to do.
and
You just have to contact.
Yeah, you basically just have to. They'll give you some kind of information when you want to do that. They'll kind of walk you through those steps. But yeah, we've known some people that have done that. We just never have done that ourselves, but it is possible.
Thank you. I recently started my own podcast, Cats on Guard, shameless plug.
Check it out.
On guard.
2 airline pilots talking about the crazy, weird things that happen in flight. And we try to maintain our anonymity due to some of the stories we tell. But right away, I got hooked up with a podcast producer
Great.
who wanted to do video. Well, that doesn't work if we want to keep our anonymity. So he came up with an idea for animation, which seemed pretty good. But I was curious, as you guys do a audio only, and that's what I was intending. What are your thoughts on video podcasts? Because it seems to be what a lot of people are doing.
Yeah.
It is, yes. And so, Spotify for podcasters is no stranger of doing the same thing, trying to like push some video and that kind of capacity for it. I think good looking video and good looking quality content is worth your time. But if it's not, it's just going to hurt your show at the end of the day, right? So you want to make sure that the stuff that you are putting out there is something that you can on a regular basis create and produce. So I think it's definitely a good tool if it is in your toolbox. But if it's something that you just don't have experience with, because for example, animation, and maybe you're an animator, which is super cool, but if that's something that you're like, oh man, I don't know how to do that every week, then I would give it pause myself. I'd go, ooh, I don't know if we can deliver this product to the capacity that I would want to, on a weekly or a monthly basis kind of thing. So it's definitely a wonderful tool. It's no short. We know that like reels are very king right now in social media, like YouTube Shorts and things like that. People do like that content, so it is another way certainly to grow an audience. But yeah, I once again would with a big asterisk say like make sure it's something that you like to do and want to do.
And another thing we obviously do like we can't really do like just a video of us because it's all like a story podcast. So we can't exactly do that in the same way that someone would do like an interview video. However, what we do a lot is on our social media, we will often make a little kind of like a little artsy video, almost like a little trailer of like a specific part. We'll take a little scene that we think is cool, it shows off an episode so that when an episode is releasing, we might grab a little very interesting little snippet and put it with like an interesting little stock video. And then, put some fancy text on there or something. Michael loves to do some cool editing on it. And that could be just like a fun way to promote your show while it's in season, is make little videos like that. If you don't want to do like, if you want to hide your what you look like and stuff, you can just create videos that are little promotional kind of things. Is fun to do and helps get some listeners.
Thank you all very much for the questions. Oh, one more.
Sorry, yeah, one more.
No, this is great. Yeah, keep coming.
You mentioned about having mic interference is more of a technical question, and I'm curious because I was under the impression that for fiction podcasting especially, it's most common to have individual actors record on a single mic. Do you think what are the benefits maybe to having multiple actors around a single mic or multiple actors on different mics versus individually?
Great
That's
question.
such a good question. So most of our show is individual actors. Of course, it takes a little bit more time to splice them all in. Amanda knows because Amanda's in our show.
Shout out Amanda.
But we honestly would recommend, I'll just say that right off, I would recommend recording each actor individually. Some reasons for that: you get more time with the actor. You get you can direct them more. You can really spend your time refining that character, and you also just have less technical issues. Now, sometimes where you might want to record 2 people at once is if there's the very important relationship in the show. For Silvertongues, one of the latest ones that we did, the 2 actors in it spend most of their time together. Most of the scenes are these 2 actors working together, and there's kind of a romantic relationship there. So it would be weird to record them completely separately when we want them to have we want them to have chemistry. So we did record those 2 actors at the same time with 2 separate microphones, right? So we just found some software. We did have some feedback issues. We were just able to kind of monkey them around and fix them. But yeah, I would say the benefit to having 2 actors in the same room, of course, is you get a little bit of their actor chemistry.
Yeah, that said, if you are just recording one actor at a time, we still do have one of us, usually off
that's
camera or off mic,
Off mic.
the recording opposite them.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard for an actor just to like read their lines only and find all those emotional moments. But what's cool is when we're reading the lines opposite them, we know kind of how the scene's supposed to go.
Yeah.
So we're able to be in that right emotional place with them. So whether we're reading for actor A or actor B, we kind of know where they should be in that scene, right? Because every scene there's an expectation, every scene there's an intention, and so getting them to that place is easier when it's like more one on one time.
And what I'll like to do is if we've recorded with one actor, then I'm recording with the second actor that's in that same scene, I will try to mimic what that first actor did to give them that same energy so that they can play off me in lieu of that other actor, and it usually turns out pretty well.
Yep. That's a great question. Yeah. Oh, yeah, one more right here.
One more?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay.
Kind of on that subject, I've heard of a few podcasts doing it with a local recording, but also on a Zoom call where all of the actors are in that call together. How do you feel on that side of things?
Yeah, it works too, and we've done some of that too. When we had to record with somebody who was in Chicago or something like that, we've had to do a little bit of that. There is more technical stuff that happens there, so I would, if you are going to bring in another actor like that in that kind of capacity, it's better if they're a voice actor, somebody who's more used to this and has their own studio, because now you're not only worried about your own sound sounding good, it's theirs that you can't control.
The biggest issue with that, I would say, or the biggest thing to worry about there is that everyone will be recording on a different type of microphone. And even though they all might be good microphones, they all might just be slightly sound different. They're all going to be in different rooms and different environments. So very often when you splice those, even though you're recording them all together, they might all have a nice chemistry, but technically you're going to have to do a little bit of post work to make sure all of their audio sounds pretty good together.
Yeah, so we, like, best case scenario for us, we really do think bringing an actor in and having them record in the space, in the studio, is going to sound the best. But yeah, if it's the way that it has to be.
And by studio, we mean our living room.
You're right. Yeah. But if you have to bring actors in because they're across the globe or whatever, yeah, just once again running some test audio so you know what you're going to be receiving from them is better than doing an entire scene or entire show and then going, oh, yikes, there's so much fridge noise that I did not know existed over there in Canada or something.
This has been awesome, and I hate to be the person to say it's time, but I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. And thank you all for showing up and being here. Thank you, everyone who's participating remotely or being an audience member. And thank you very much, Josie, Eli, Herman, and Michael Allen Herman, for being here and sharing your expertise.
Thanks so much for having us, guys. Yeah. Thank you.